So, hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. We have three experts with us, wonderful women. Isabella is a professor from UMass Boston and founder and executive director at Fundación Play. Katie is co-director of Charlestown Nursery School. Kelly is co-founder too and co-director of Charlestown Nursery School. You can find all the details of their CV on the information poster. A few reminders before we get started. Please keep your cameras and the mics off during the presentation of our speakers. Feel free to ask questions at any point during the presentation using the chat. At some moments, the speakers will ask you to share your ideas or thoughts, and for that, you can turn on your microphones. Questions and comments can be made in Spanish, and if you want, we will be answered in Spanish too by Isabella. This roundtable meeting it's been being recorded, and now in Spanish. Bienvenidos todos, muchísimas gracias por compartir esta tarde con nosotros. Tenemos a tres expertas maravillosas, encantadoras, Isabella, Kelly, Katie. Y bueno, la idea de esta mesa redonda, que vamos a intentar, una mesa redonda virtual, es compartir experiencias, compartir opiniones y sobre todo, ya lo dirá Isabella, pues motivar muchísimo y animar mucho para la innovación en educación infantil. Son personas que tienen experiencias quizá muy distintas a las que tengamos aquí en España, o al menos de otra parte del mundo, y creo que puede ser muy enriquecedor que entre todos las compartamos. Es decir, para ellas también es muy enriquecedor escuchar nuestras opiniones. Las preguntas se pueden hacer en español. Isabella es española, aunque trabaja en Boston, pero las podrá responder en español. Así que, y cualquier término, de hecho Isabella puede, si quieres, tranquilamente puedes algunas ideas o términos también decirlos de manera bilingüe en español y en inglés para facilitar la comprensión de todos. Y nada, espero que sea muy enriquecedor para todos y sobre todo muy agradable porque son un encanto las tres. Muchas gracias. Isabella, te paso la palabra.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias, Carmen. La verdad que estamos encantadas de formar parte de esta mesa redonda, de crear este tipo de diálogo, de conversación que creemos que es súper necesario en nuestro campo de la educación infantil. Entonces, crear estos espacios y este tiempo, ¿no?, para este diálogo es fundamental, y te doy las gracias por esta oportunidad de tenernos aquí. Gracias. Vale, pues voy a compartir la pantalla, ¿de acuerdo? A ver. Vale, creo que ya la estoy compartiendo. Ok, entonces sí, como Carmen comentó, bueno, esta presentación la vamos a hacer en inglés, pero en cualquier momento podemos cambiar al español. Y bueno, y las preguntas pueden ser tanto en inglés como en español, no hay ningún problema. Ok. So yes, so thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be, part of this conversation today. Kelly, Katie, and myself, we are going to be talking about how we can rebuild research-driven schools. So we can start, like all together, the process for reimagining, our field. So we are going to have a brief introduction. Let me see. Sorry, I wasn't presenting. Okay, here. So as Carmen said, my name is Isabella Garcia Senent. I'm a professor, a faculty member at UMass Boston. I became a preschool teacher a few years ago, and I was very fortunate to be part of two different kind of, schools. And And I have to say that I have seen firsthand how high quality early childhood education can benefit the development of young children. And today my passion is to share my experience, my knowledge with my students at UMass Boston. So when they graduate from the program, they can see what's possible and they can be part of that process of rebuilding our education system. So yeah, they are passionate. They have those leadership skills to transform our field and to make some change. So that's who I am. That's my passion. And now, Kelly, if you would like to introduce yourself a little bit too.
Hear me now? It's
Yeah.
mute. Was I on mute?
No.
Okay. So hello, I'm Kelly Pellegrini. I am the founder and co-director at Charlestown Nursery School, and we just want to thank you for letting us be part of the partnership and the roundtable. We are very delighted to be with other educators who are so enthusiastic about early childhood. Like Katie, and she will introduce herself as well. We had been in the field of early childhood for many years. We had taught in international schools and lab schools and public schools and all sorts of places, and then began this school. So we too have had experiences across many sectors. We are now at a school that welcomes over 1,000 educators from around the world and really trying to look at best practices. We are passionate about the opportunity to provide better early childhood experiences for children and want to take every opportunity to learn from some of the best schools in the world, particularly with a focus in taking the theory that we all have studied so well and putting it into everyday practice. And of course, that is in English, they say sort of where the rubber meets the road, but where the real work and real challenges. It is one thing to think of these possibilities theoretically, but to really live them and to embody them and to empower teachers and children and family to really capitalize on 0 to 5 is our passion. So Katie will introduce herself.
Thank you. As Kelly said, we are just honored to be with you all today. It is such a treat for us to learn from you and for us to talk about our practice. We, due to the pandemic, are not currently welcoming visitors into the classrooms in our schools. So we feel incredibly grateful for this technology so that we can connect with educators from all over the world and continue to share and learn from many educators from many different schools and backgrounds. Like Kelly said, I have been in the field of early childhood education for a long time, but previously I was a primary school teacher and have been consulting and advising. And every time we have a chance to talk about our practice, we learn more and we refine more. So this is a great opportunity for us. And we just look forward to all of your questions and wonderings and an ongoing partnership. So thank you again for having us. And I'll pass it back over to Isabella.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelly and Katie. So yeah, we would like to start our conversation with a video that reflects best practices. It's a video on play and the importance of play in the early years. So let's watch it all together, and we will have the chance to go back to this video to reflect about the rights of children, child development. So let's just take a few minutes to watch it all together.
Today, children are playing less, both in school, unfortunately, because of the trend towards standards and testing that's really eroded playtime in school. And then, unfortunately, outside of school, kids have so many hours on screens and digital devices that they're not playing like they used to. It's eroding their ability to develop social awareness, emotional awareness on some pretty deep levels and skills in those areas. It's something we need to remedy fast. It's kind of a miraculous thing. Children all over the world know how to play. Nobody teaches them. If you look at young children, you're going to see that they're playing. Anything that's that universal, like walking, talking, must be really essential for human development.
Play is the place where children learn how to deal with real-world things, where they can take control of them, where they can try things out, where they can see how they work.
Those neurons are connecting and strengthening as children engage in the world. And much of the time, if you watch them in natural experience, they're playing.
And in the process, as children get more developmentally advanced, they bring more and more sophisticated process into their play, and it's so important for optimal development.
They're learning how to solve problems. They're doing all this naturally. It's extraordinary how much learning on the social and emotional plane is occurring. Play is a very holistic thing. So sometimes we say, oh, we learn concepts, we learn social, emotional skills, but the truth is the whole child's engaged in play all the time. They are talking all the time, they're interacting, they're deciding together what they're going to build if it's in blocks, and they're building together.
You learn things about gravity. You learn things about eye-hand coordination. You learn things about geometry.
They're communicating about what they're doing and collaborating in the story. They're hearing each other's ideas and altering their own.
It's that concrete hands-on experience where you try things, you see how they work, you make mistakes, you adjust your eye-hand coordination, and every child's going to do that in a different way.
They're thinking in original ways, they're inventing, they're creating. These are the capacities that we need as human beings.
That process they're going through, that learning to problem find and problem solve and being really good at it and getting the satisfaction of doing it, that's what they need to do to learn how to read.
Everything that they are going to need for later learning and success in school and life is getting established in the play process in the early years.
The better problem finders they are, the more engaged they're going to become in the world, the better learners they're going to be, and the better participants they're going to be.
Okay, so one second. Okay, so we wanted to show this video because it highlights the important role of play in child development. We wanted to start, with this provocation so we can reflect about best practices and the rights of children. So yeah, and we will, as I said before, we will have a chance to go back to that video to make connections with, what we are discussing over this presentation. For now, we just want to give you guys a context of why we began this work. So, for us, it has been, to be in this field, it has been an opportunity to reimagine and innovate. But let's bring some kind of context, historical context. Let's go back to the 19th century, when in the era of industrialization, right? That was a very important time for our societies. So, the industrialization, sorry. Can you guys hear me well? Yeah? Okay. So the industrialization brought modernization, right? Advance in our society. And also it brought urbanization, right? Cities were creating, right? Were created. People moved from rural environments to urban ones, right? There was a huge development of factories. And the schools around that time, were a reflection of the needs of that era, right? The society needed workers, right? Workers who could go to those factories to work there, right? There were workers who had a very automatic job, right? They were part of the process to create a result, right? Like a product. And so they were given instructions and they just had to deliver those ones. So those values, around those factories were reflected in the schools as well. Okay. So the school system was linear, hierarchical, and homogeneous. So it was hierarchical in the sense that the administrators were the ones who created the curriculum, and the teachers just had to deliver that kind of curriculum. And it was homogeneous in the sense that the students had a passive role, right? So the teachers had to deliver that knowledge, and the students, children, they just needed to acquire or process, that information through memorization or some other cognitive skills. So during, the industrialization area, right, that's how, the education system was created. But it's important, also to understand, what happened in the 20th century, right? What kind of theories came alive, right, to break that tendency, that way of teaching and learning. And so we had in the US, we had John Dewey, who was the first one who said that that wasn't the way, to learn and the way to teach. He was actually the first one who created the first lab school, in the sense that he believed that teachers needed some kind of support in their practice, that there were ways to connect their practice with the theory, right? That was, that connection was so important, so teachers could teach, the best way possible. And also, he kind of changed the role of the student. In the past, right, the students had that passive role where they were just sitting, acquiring some kind of knowledge that was delivered by the teacher. But he was the one who said, children learn best when they are active, when they collaborate, when they cooperate, right? They learn in groups. They need those kind of interactions. And also he said that, when you are involved in projects, that's when learning happens. Instead of, having that kind of instruction in a lecture setting where, the teacher is just talking. So he believed that the students needed to be involved in those kind of projects. And he was the first one also to talk about curriculum based on interest, right? When you are involved in the process of learning, when you has some kind of connection with that learning because you are interested in what's happening there, right? You are more involved, and the learning happens. So he was also the one who started, who came up with this concept of hands-on learning, where the student again was like very active, interacting with not just other peers and adults, but also with materials. Okay, so using all their senses. And I just love this quote from him that says that education is not preparation for life, education is life itself, in the sense that we don't need to disconnect schools from our communities, right? Like children doesn't need to live in a bubble, right, where we are teaching certain academic stuff that are disconnected from the rest of the world. The world is part of the school, and so we should see that connection there, right? So that was John Dewey, and he had a big influence in Europe as well. And then we had Maria Montessori, who was born in Italy, and the same, she has a big influence even today around the world. And her values were that the children, she believed that children could develop independence, that children learned through exploration, and that they were curious by nature. So she yeah, so, and also because like she believed in the potential of the child, she created, her idea was like to create aesthetic environments where using like neutral colors, pieces of furniture that were at the level of the children, that that were developmentally appropriate, because she believed that the child was at the center, that in those learning environments we had to focus on the child, like they were the center of the learning process. She also believed on choices, to give them the opportunity to choose from different materials. The curriculum was also based on interest and abilities. So, the teaching is very individualized, right? Based on where they are, where children are developmentally speaking. So yeah, and also, the teaching is rooted in observation and individualization, in the sense that, the teacher has a very active role observing the child, seeing where the child is, so they can support them best, they can guide them in their learning process. And she created she focuses also on the development of self-correcting materials that are well known all around the world, materials where, like you have to stack them. So children have to figure out, the sequence, the pattern. So if a piece of those materials don't fit, right, they can figure out why, right? So they can develop those problem-solving, skills. I just love this quote from Maria Montessori: "Never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed." And it tells, again, it's a reminder that, the teacher is there, to guide the learning process of the child, but the child is capable to figure things out by himself. So he's part of that construction of his knowledge. And then Loris Malaguzzi, I have studied his approach for many years. He was a pedagogist from Italy, from a region in the north of Italy called Reggio Emilia. And today this approach is spread all over the world, and many schools are inspired under this approach. And, you know, the whole approach started right after the Second World War. Around that time, there was desire to build a new society under, democratic values, right? Those democratic values that have been given away, right, for many years during the war. So, people were craving that. They and there were like a group of moms a group of women who had to go back to work, right, to rebuild the cities, and they wanted to create schools, spaces, for children to have joy, right, to learn in a democratic, environment. The children around that time, of course, they have suffered a war, right, that there was there was so much trauma behind that. So, the main focus around that time was to create an environment, that could bring some kind of like peace into that learning process. And Loris Malaguzzi was a pedagogist who was around. So, this group of women called him, and they all together started the schools, brick by brick with the materials that they had, because the cities were completely destroyed. And so the values, the elements of this approach reflects that history, that piece of history, right? They see the children as capable. They see them as, citizens. They are part of, our society, and they see them like competent and curious. They believe that all the children have a desire to learn. They are curious by nature, and they believe that children learn through interactions. Those interactions among peers, between adults and children, and also interactions with the environment and with the materials that they have. So that's how children learn best. And also the role of the teacher is super interesting here. They see the teacher as a researcher. So the teacher here plays a very active role. They are researchers in the sense that, they are making observations. They are present in the moment. They are seeing the children. They are trying to investigate, what children might be thinking, what they might be feeling, and they are trying to understand why children behave that way, right? But they are learning from them as well. So they are constructing, that knowledge together. There is a relationship there. So the teacher is not there, right, to give them some kind of instruction. The teacher is there to learn with them, right? The environment plays an important role here too. They say that the environment is a third teacher, in the sense that children learn through that interaction with their environment and the materials that they have. In this approach, they use a lot of open-ended materials. It can be called loose parts as well, and that's another term for that. And it comes from that idea, of playing or manipulating, the materials that they had around, right? Like the city was completely destroyed after the war, so they didn't have a lot of resources, right, to have access to materials. So children started playing with everything they had around. And it's so interesting because research has shown now that those materials are super powerful. Those materials foster creativity, right? Because they are manipulating those one, and they are creating. So they don't have like a purpose, right? Like a symbolic material might have, right? But with those ones, you foster that creativity because of that, because you are manipulating, and every time that you are interacting with them, you are creating new things. In this approach, they use an emergent curriculum. So the curriculum is built based on the interest of the children. They are part of that process, and families and the whole community is very involved. And this is, again, an element that is reflected by what this town experienced after the war. After the war, everybody was involved in building these schools, and still today you can see those values embedded in the practice of these schools. And documentation is also one of the elements that is like very important in this approach. They make learning visible. They believe that what happens in the classroom in those schools should be visible to all, so we can also learn how children learn best, so we can be part of their development. And one of the quotes that I absolutely love from Lord Malaguzzi is that our task is to help children communicate with the world using all their potential, strengths, and languages, and to overcome any obstacle presented by our culture. Lord Malaguzzi was the first one who said that children have 100 language. 100 language, in the sense that, they have 100 ways, to express themselves, 100 ways, to learn. So we need to create those environments, right, to get the best of, the best potential of the children. And of course, to overcome any obstacle in the sense that, we need to develop those critical thinking skills. So when children face adversity, they are ready, to solve that issue. And the last theories that we would like to mention today is Howard Gardner. By then, until, Howard Gardner wrote this theory, the education system focused only on verbal skills and mathematical skills. That's how they were measuring intelligence. And Howard Gardner came with this theory to highlight, the potential of all the children. That, children have other abilities, other skills that need to be measured too, and that's part of, who they are, and that's, part of, their development, and we should consider those ones as well. So as you should know, right, I mean, I'm pretty sure that you know about Howard Gardner, those are the different kind of intelligences, and he describes intelligence as the ability to find and solve problems and create products of value in one's own culture. So they have influenced our practice, and in our practice, we see those values reflected. I just want to share my perspective as an educator and as a mom. I have been very fortunate to teach in 2 different environments. And the first one, maybe it wasn't, like that positive, because I was in an environment where I could see the disconnect between, these values and the practice. But it also made me reflect about my own practice and what I thought it was possible for the field of early childhood education. And after that experience, I went to a school that was a region-inspired school, where I could resonate, like where I could feel, connected, and where I could see those values, from these theories, reflected in the practice. And I'm as a mom, I'm also like I feel very, very fortunate. My children have had the experience to be at Charleston Nursery School, a magical place where children succeed, where children are fulfilled. They are surrounded by rich learning environments, high qualified teachers who promote these kind of learning environments. So I have seen how, low quality programs can be detrimental for the development of children. And on the other hand, I see how high quality programs are super beneficial for, children development. So yeah, that's, what I'm trying to share in my own practice as a faculty member at UMass Boston. I just want for my students, when they graduate, I just want for them to know that, this kind of education is possible and that they can be part of, rebuilding our system. Now, Kelly and Katie, they are going to share their context for starting CNS and why we started, what kind of motivation, they had to build Charleston Nursery School.
Thank you. Yeah, so we will share sort of, again, as Isabella mentioned, that we had been teaching and we had been consulting and we had been advising and we had most of all been studying. And so when it became time to send our own children to school, we went to go see many, many schools, hundreds of schools we went to see. And we were surprised to see how few of them actually reflected the theory and the beliefs that she just outlined in that. We saw, two extremes of schools, and I think Katie will give even more richer examples of this, but we would often see schools that were still very, very traditional and based on a factory model, and we saw lots of schools that were essentially play groups where they were not integrating the kinds of skills that Gardner mentioned. So it was surprising to us to be in Boston, where there are some of the top universities, where we have very rich science labs, where we have high medical possibilities, and yet you would go to early childhood centers and they looked very much like where we had gone to school, or perhaps even where our parents had gone to school. The practice had not really evolved with the science. And so, given that what we know from the theory, and then also what we'll speak to a little bit more even later, is the research that children, the window of opportunity from 0 to 5 is so powerful, and that we know so much about how children learn, that the roots of Dewey and the roots of Montessori and the roots of Reggio and the roots of Gardner have all been proven again and again and again. And so when we talk to our neighbors and our colleagues and our friends who think about how do we solve the challenges of global warming, how do we prepare people for an innovative economy, how do we take advantage of an information age, it becomes even more relevant to have schools that are in fact engaging in the kind of learning that elevates the brain, the mind, and the heart. And so as parents, we had a real crossroads. We wanted to just, write a check and send our children to a school. But when we went to go see schools that did not look like what we believed in, it became a real tug. And so we were in many ways put in the same position as Maria Montessori, or put in the same position as the mothers in Reggio Emilia, or put in the same position of many, many pioneers ahead of us in having to really build a school and take the theory and put it into practice, because we could not have spent our life studying and teaching and working in this way and not provide it for our own children. And, over the course of the 15 years, some of the same things that inspired us to start the school continue to influence us, because, and perhaps Katie can sort of talk about what we see typically in classrooms here in the United States that may not be so reflective of some of those important theories. Katie.
Thank you. So as Kelly said, the more we have learned and studied and researched, the more we know, and this of course is very much ongoing, that, and Isabella will touch on this as well, that the period of 0 to 5 is the most impactful time in a human's life. And we felt really committed to making the most of that brain development, knowing that it is a short window and knowing that early childhood creates such a foundation for all people, for their lives, and feeling like, gosh, we have a real opportunity to put that research and put that theory into practice. So as Kelly said, when we look at schools, even right here in our own neighborhood in Boston, but certainly across the United States, there are many schools who are still implementing a letter of the week or color of the month sort of canned curriculum. We see even neighbors who are creating pumpkins from paper plates and really offering children crafts or an opportunity to use worksheets. And we really wanted to create something that better reflected the brain science and allowed children to play and learn through play, as we saw in the video certainly, and also provide rich contextual opportunities for children to develop a love for literacy and a love for math and a love for the arts through meaningful and developmentally appropriate opportunities. So our children are opening pumpkins and exploring the inside and planting the seeds and wondering what will happen. They are going far beyond crafts or any project that has a product or an end result, and really having an opportunity to explore with materials in an open-ended way. And again, in terms of our context for starting, we just didn't see this happening in lots of places in Boston. And so we thought, what if we can create a model or a sample of what is possible? And we're still learning and growing each month, each year. At CNS, we continue to evolve and shift our practice and grow, supporting our teachers and supporting the organization, because all of that research and science is ongoing. So it's very much a work in progress, and we're still a very young school, but it's been an exciting evolution even thus far to show children are incredibly capable and they are incredibly bright and able, and it's such a joy to be with, as you all certainly know, but it's been a pretty remarkable opportunity to show just how much so. Isabella?
You're on mute.
Isabella, I think you're still muted.
Okay, now, right?
Now we hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So yeah, I had to stop showing my presentation to unmute myself. So let me go back here. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, so now we are going to go over the process for building and rebuilding better practice in schools. But we need to, in order to do that, we need to get knowledge from the latest research. In the last decades, the educational neuroscience discipline have informed us of better practices, because this new discipline combines the psychology field and the educational field, and based on that research on brain development. We are very fortunate today we have technology to do fMRI studies where we can scan the brain, where we can see, brain activation. and that can inform us of how, we can implement that data, that information into the classroom, in the way we are teaching, the way children are learning. The contributions from neuroscience and psychology have impacted the process of learning, right? As I said, the process of learning and teaching in early childhood education. It has been amazing to have that information, right, from neuroscience. So we can better understand people's mental processes. We can better understand how children feel, how children think, and why they behave the way they do. So it's wonderful to have that information. So from the neuroscience field, I think that the most shocking finding is that 90% of brain development happens in the first 5 years. This is, I believe that this has changed the way we see children. It's unfortunate that sometimes, right, because children are not able to express themselves in a verbal way, right? We don't think that, there is so much learning happening during those first years, right? That just because, the child is painting, just because the child is playing with other children, nothing is happening there. That learning starts in kindergarten. Once the child is 5, once the child is able to articulate himself in a verbal way, once the child starts reading, and I think that this is transforming our field and the way we see children. Right? We need to invest in the early years because there is so much happening there. Right? It's shocking to know that 90% of brain development happens in the first 5 years, and just 10% in the rest of our years, our life. So we can use some principles from neuroscience, and we can implement that in our practice as educators. The first principle is that the brain develops beginning already in the prenatal stage. Unfortunately, many decades ago, psychology, so many fields like psychology and education focused on the child since the child was born. Today, we know that those 9 months when the baby is in the mom's womb, that's a crucial period of time. That's where, the brain is developing, and we know that the environment during those 9 months, it's going to shape, that environment is going to shape the child, who the child is later on. So let's watch a brief video. Is just 2 minutes on how the brain develops in those months when the baby's in the mommy's tummy. Okay, so let's see.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, and now we are going to see another, okay, one second. Sorry. And now we are gonna see another video. It's from the same series of videos. And this one is on how genes and experiences shape the development of the brain. Sorry.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
So yeah, so these videos are wonderful because they reflect, right, the importance of those interactions for brain development, but also, from neuroscience, we know that the capacity of the brain to develop decreases with age. That doesn't mean that there is no room for learning, right? Like, we all as educators, we know that education happens across your life, but it's true that the capacity of the brain decreases, what means that learning happens, but in a different way, in a different path. But knowing that most of the development of the brain happens in the early years, help us to create, those positive environments, for learning, and positive environments to build the foundation for what the child is going to be in the future. And another principle from neuroscience is that the cognitive, social, and emotional capacities are interconnected for one's whole life. For many, many decades, psychology and some other disciplines studied the brain or the mind from different perspectives, focusing on just one domain of development. Today, we know that everything is more interconnected, so we can't study cognitive skills, ignoring some social emotional skills. We know that everything has an influence and everything is interconnected in the development of learning. And also another principle from neuroscience is that toxic stress affecting the architecture and development of the brain may cause issues related to learning, behavior, and physical and mental health. This is an issue today, right? We are all in the middle of a pandemic. We are all experiencing so much stress that it can become toxic, right? Because it's not just like once, like in your life. We have been suffering from this pandemic for a whole year. So this toxic stress is, just in us, right? Like every day in our mind, right? Being worried about, getting COVID or getting worried about, others, or, family members, getting sick. So, we now, can we can think about toxic stress in our lives, right? Because we are suffering from that. But this is just so interesting. We know that toxic stress in children, can affect the function and the architecture of the children. So we need to create environments, to compensate that toxic stress somehow. And the schools, today they are the perfect environment, to escape from that toxic stress that is, around us because of the pandemic. So let's see this video.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Okay. So, I've been, yeah. Okay, and from the psychology field, we have learned so much from the last decades as well. Psychology studies the mental processes of, people, child development has been showing that the development, right, that the development occurs in a predictable sequence. Today we know that, children, I don't want to repeat myself, but it's like, we better understand, right, development, all the different milestones children go through. So it has a predictable sequence, right? We know that children around the age of 1, they start walking, for example. But we also know that there are different windows there, right? Like there are a few months, like over a year or below a year, right, where children can develop those physical skills. So each child is different. Child developmental learning is categorized by individual variation. And also we know that children learn and develop when we meet those needs, right? Children are all different. They have different needs. They develop in different ways. And it's important to create learning environments where we can make those observations so we can support children where they are, right? Developmentally speaking. And also, another principle from psychology, those studies have shown us that children learn interacting with the environment, that they need the environment, right, to get that impact, right, to get that stimulation. They also learn from other adults and other children. And also children learn by playing. Play is crucial. Children learn through their senses, and play allows them, to use them, to combine different senses to make, those neural connections, right, that are happening through, the stimulation of the sensory system. And also we know that children construct their own knowledge, that they are part of, that process. It's so interesting because, sometimes, children, they drive us crazy, right? They do exactly what they are not supposed to do, right? If we say no, don't touch that, right? They are gonna do it, right? Because they need to explore their world, the world. They need to touch it, right? To make those connections. Okay, the surface is hard or soft, and my mom is saying that that's a ball. So I'm making, those connections, right? Through, the different senses, right? Like I can hear, the word ball, and I'm able, to touch it and even, put it in my mouth. So I can explore, that sense as well, right? I can see, I can feel the texture. So that's how they construct, their own knowledge, by exploring, by being curious about, what's happening, right? What's the cause and the effect, right? So that exploration is crucial. Okay, and then also, in our field, from our field, we know that the child can't learn in isolation, right? The child, we need to see the child from an ecological perspective, right? We are all part of communities, right, where the child is interconnected in interaction with, families, family members, and also schools. They belong to a system, right? And everything is interconnected, and everything is influencing the learning process of the child. And also, our field has shown us that, again, the child is curious by nature, right? Children have an inborn drive to explore, experiment, and make discoveries, right? This drive gives children a huge capacity for focus, concentration, and persistence, right? Also, those flexible brains. Today we know that children see more, they hear more, experience more, and feel more strongly than adults. Their senses are more developed than even adults. And that gives us an opportunity, right, to show them the world, right, so they can explore it through their senses. So that's why it's super important, right, in the learning environment to set up the environment in a way they can explore different materials, right? So we can also provoke, their thinking through those materials. And then we also know that children are scientists, that the way they think is like similarly to the way that scientists think, right, or approach their work. So they always begin with the question why, right, and they collect information to answer it, right? So the children, if you are saying don't touch that, they are going to be like, why? So I'm going to touch it and I'm going to collect information, right? They want to know. So children observe, explore, and investigate. They sort and classify, and then formulate an hypothesis, right? They test the hypothesis and analyze what happens. They try things again and again to consolidate their understanding. Based on the data, they either disprove the hypothesis or start the process again, or they formulate a final hypothesis and come to a conclusion. So over that process, they are learning so much. They are learning the cause and effect, and they are, exploring and analyzing, that hypothesis so they can answer, the why question. And so now we are in the 21st century, right? We went through, the 19th century, the 20th century, and today we are here, right? There is an amazing quote from Tony Wagner. He's a professor at Harvard University, and he says that the world no longer cares how much you know. The world cares about what you can do with what you know, right? Today we have Google, right? We can search, any kind of information, like in just 1 second, and we have the answer. So today is not about, what you know. It's about what you can do, what you know. So we need to develop, 21st century skills like creativity, motivation, empathy, conflict resolution, entrepreneurship, this word is so hard for me, entrepreneurship, thinking, critical skills, and decision making. Those are the skills that children are going to need to be successful in their personal and professional life. And now Kelly and Katie, they are going to explain how they can acquire, the information from this kind of research and how they can translate it into their practice so they can improve the teaching learning process.
Wonderful. Thank you, Isabella. So we are, as we said, when we started the school, we were really thinking of how are we rebuilding and reimagining so that it reflects these theories. But the theories are theories. And what has been exciting, as she mentioned, over the last 2 decades, in our communities, there has been a greater understanding of brain development. In Boston, historically, most of our investment is in higher education. And we have a lot of evidence that early childhood is also a very important place to be investing because of the brain development there. And to, I think, our point about these different kinds of schools, all of our early childhood centers are warm and nurturing and lovely. And children are thriving in many ways. However, the question is are they truly reaching their full potential? And the research is what can really drive us around this question of reaching full potential. And it feels important. I think people would say these theories are lovely and that's fine, but it's not so vital. And as Isabella shows, given what we know about the brain and the impact of every interaction and the impact of language and all of those things, it's not a nice to have a school that reflects the theory and research. It's a have to have. It's a must have. If we truly want children to thrive and to succeed and to be ready for this 21st century, they have to have these experiences early on. So the child who is doing letter of the week is not going to be as prepared as the child who is writing their own story. The child who is looking at plastic bugs and coloring in a worksheet is not going to be as prepared as the child who is finding insects and developing curriculum around that. And so it is very important for us to create classroom communities that are influenced by all aspects of the research. First, we begin with the teacher. I think, what she showed in her research evidence was that it really, the serve and return, the dialogue with teachers, the kinds of things that they're providing are vital. So historically, we would have the teachers who are in early childhood would be undereducated. We want the most educated teachers, because the more sophisticated their language, the more sophisticated their study, the more interested they are in art and science and all of those things, the more elevated the children's language is going to be. Then we want them trained in the development. That's sort of one example of the way that the research influences us. Another way of the research influences is what she talked about, is this idea that children are engaging in all their senses and all their opportunities. So we think about classroom spaces that are like learning labs or like art studios, or that are providing really real and authentic multidisciplinary opportunities. So you can walk into them and see things that even as an adult you would find interesting and engaging. Everything from the digital microscope to the farming tools, to the music education, to the kinds of fruits and vegetables, to the real plants and animals. It's all real and authentic. And I think you saw on those slides before, real hammers, real tools, real possibilities, because what we're trying to do is create situations where they can be engineers and be musicians and be artists. She also sort of talked about this importance of problem solving and being able to ask questions and engage in those. So rather than be a school that has a set curriculum where everybody is doing the same thing and the curriculum has been the same forever, we are providing a rich experience, just like the research shows, offering a teacher who can engage in rich interaction, and then observing to see what children are doing so that we can allow them to ask that why and give them opportunities to be scientists, to be artists, to be mathematicians, to be musicians. And so in every aspect, we're really trying to figure out, how is this research driven? We will have colleagues who will say, oh, but it's lovely for them to all do the same Christmas tree, unit, or it's fine for them all to do that. But we say, but that's not, we know from the science, that's not how children learn. We know from the science that when it's not real and authentic, it's not a deep understanding. And in the United States, quite frankly, for all of our resources, we do have a population who struggles with math. We often don't think critically about our literature. We're often not as scientifically informed as we could be. And therefore, we're not really in a position to do the kinds of things that we hope to do. So following that research has been really, really important in every single decision that we make. Everything that teachers are doing, we have to ask the question, is this how we understand the brain works and people learn? Or is this just something to fill the time? Or is this just something we have done since the beginning of time? So maybe Katie can talk about some of the other research influences. It is certainly Jack Shankoff and the neuroscientists at Harvard's that Isabella showed. It is certainly Tony Wagner and Ken Robinson and some of the people who are looking at 21st century schools. It is certainly Reggio, it's certainly Montessori, but we are also drawn and influenced by other aspects of research in education that we really are weaving together as our best practice. We think about Reggio being sort of the roots because it is so well grounded in Piaget and Vygotsky and all of those things. But we are also weaving in other practices. So I don't know if Katie, you can talk about some of the other research influences that have been important to us.
Sure. As Kelly said, we are truly inspired, and we really believe the foundations of the Reggio-inspired approach lay our groundwork in terms of the child is capable and parents as partners, environment as third teacher, having a co-teaching model, and all of those true principles that have come out of Reggio Emilia continue to be our foundation and what we draw from. But additionally, the neuroscience and brain work, research that, again, is ongoing and evolving each year continues to support, of course, those theories and philosophies. So we are always reading and reflecting on that, but we're inspired by Maria Montessori, who Isabella, of course, introduced, and we have integrated more than ever this year due to the pandemic. Many of her materials, or Montessori-inspired materials, the capable life skills and the grace and courtesy have long been a part of our curriculum, where we've seamlessly infused some of those practices. We're inspired by some influences of Waldorf and their focus on nature and the turning of the seasons and some of their open-ended materials. So rather than having toy kitchens or designated areas of the room that are for one particular type of dramatic play, we have been inspired by their open-ended wooden features and scarves rather than costumes, so that children are able to take the inquiry in a place that is meaningful and authentic to them in that moment. As Kelly and Isabella have certainly touched upon, the rote opportunities that we still very, very much see in the US in early childhood, where children are learning letters from worksheets and really being offered a chance to memorize rather than truly understand, we feel is such a missed opportunity, not just with the 21st century life skills that we hope all children will leave from and those essential life skills that will carry them forward, but also because we can do better. And we found that it's a really exciting and inspiring place to be, knowing how children are engaged and are really enjoying these hands-on experiences. The questions they ask and the direction that they're able to take inquiry, of course, thanks to the scaffolding of our highly trained teachers and the environment and all of those influences that are woven in, is inspiring to us each and every year. So we feel really grateful for that opportunity. What did I miss, Kelly?
No, I would just say that, and so we have also found great influence in the research around mindful schools. We have also found great influence in Jo Bressler's work at Stanford and some of her math learning. We also are integrating a lot of the speech and language and Orton Gillingham and those aspects of multisensory literacy instruction. And you just see it all weaving and weaving together because it all supports this really strong foundation. Last Child in the Woods, the information on nature's kindergarten, the work in Finland, the work in Anji Play in China. So it is not a moment where we have to be choosing one or the other. It is all just guiding us in one direction that is about integrating the best possibilities for children. And I think, Isabella showed that in the Dewey and the Reggio and the Montessori, but certainly Howard Gardner, this idea that you are serving multiple intelligences. And so we're always combining the, intentional with the unintentional experiences and that whole spectrum of possibility. It demands, and I think we will talk to this later at some point, is that our teachers are researchers and that they are constantly getting information on what is available. So each week they are reading many, many articles. They have a reading and reflections time. They have an hour of research and development for every hour that they teach. But in order to be truly impacted by what the science is saying, we have to be constantly in university and constantly growing and constantly engaged in that work. So that's what I am remembering. Isabella.
Isabella, you're muted.
Okay, now, right? Okay. All right. So I'm realizing that we are kind of like over time a little bit. So yeah, we would love to hear from all the participants. We would like to create some kind of dialogue. So yeah, we are gonna briefly talk about the rights of children, and then we are gonna open the conversation to all of you who are there listening to us. I'm so sorry, you know, like Kelly, Katie, and I, we tend to talk a lot. So yeah, we are gonna very, very soon we are gonna allow you, you know, to participate because we really want to learn from you. So yeah, for us, you know, everything starts with the view of the child, right? We believe that children come to school full of wonder, eager to understand and be competent. We believe that when we neglect to see who children really are, we miss the opportunity to witness the profound process of human development that is unfolding before our eyes. So when we begin to value who children are, a shift happens in the way we think about learning and teaching. And these bring amazing transformation about I mean, you know, like we need a pedagogy, right? A way of thinking about learning and teaching that mirrors our vision for children. So it's important, right, to have that kind of pedagogy, right, in action. It's not just about how you see the children, but how you put that in practice. Teachers who subscribe to a pedagogy like this come from a place of curiosity as well, right? We have been talking about how children are curious by nature, but also, you know, it's important to develop our own curiosity, you know, as adults, right? And teachers believe in children's capacities and know that they are engaging in a process that is not static, is unfolding, right? It's a process. And moving children into the center of our focus teaches us more about child development. It's not just about understanding child development, what you need, right, in your teaching, but also, you know, like when you move those children into the center of our focus, that teaches us about, you know, their development. So we, in that process, we begin to understand the learning involved in self-chosen play and the components of a curriculum shaped around children's perspectives. And briefly, Kelly is gonna share where we can see this pedagogy in action, you know, which organizations are advocating for the rights of children. And then we are going to open it, you know, to all of us so we can discuss, you know, what we believe, you know, the children's rights should be. So yeah, Kelly.
Perfect. And I won't go through all of these. I will just say that you know, I think people often ask us, what is our step for building and rebuilding? And we hope we can engage you all in that question too. So it is first to ask, like, what kind of schools do we want? And that's really why we rebuilt it. It is to look at what are the theories that we know, what is the research we know, but fundamentally it's about what we think the rights of children are. And one of our struggles in Boston and the United States is we have not adopted the United Nations agreements on rights. So we do not have a view of what all children deserve. We do not yet view them as citizens, but that has clearly inspired the places that have the best schools. So Reggio really thinks about the rights of children. And when we think of then, I think Boulder is another example where they've had children engage in the rights of children. And Project Zero thinks of the rights of children. So we have a very simple process at the beginning of the year. This is Boulder's Rights of Children, and these are written by the children, is before we do anything, and before we rebuild, and before we build the school, it is not about like getting the building ready or the website or designing the playground. We meet as a community, and often parents are engaged in this, and children can be engaged in this, but first and foremost, our teachers are. And so we assume if we were starting the school brand new tomorrow, or next September, any year that we're starting, what do we believe every child deserves? And that circles back to what we fundamentally want to be. Because you can have a very fancy mission, you can have a very fancy theory, but if your heart and your beliefs are not committed to the rights of children, that doesn't matter. Every professional development that we start begins with the rights of children. We think of what is the environment going to look like? We go back to what do we believe the rights of children are? What does the research say? And then what is that we want to create? If we think about the materials in the classroom, we think what are the rights of children? What are the research, and what is it that we insist must be there? And so for us, when we were looking at schools, part of the reasons is it just didn't resonate with our rights. We believe it's the right of children to have all fresh fruit and healthy foods. And we went to see schools and they have just terrible processed food. We believe it's the right of children to have opportunities to engage in, open-ended art projects. And so we make that come through. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rights. We believe that they must have teachers who are documenting what they say. We believe it should be joyful. We believe there should be enough structure. We believe that, there should be Montessori opportunities. There should be Waldorf opportunities. All of those things guide us each day, and that practice of really thinking carefully about what we believed all children deserve. And so we would be curious to know what you all are thinking about what are the rights of children and what do schools have to be. Because I think for us, we've learned, sometimes we are in tension as teachers. Some teachers believe the classroom should be very quiet and some people believe it should be very loud. And we work through that with the research and with the theories to create some mutual understanding. But if we are not mutually invested in the same goals, then I think that can really be one of our challenges. So we can go on and on about the rights, and they're certainly on our website and other places, but we would be curious to hear what you all have to say, because I think that is fundamental to rebuilding school.
And I'll just really quickly add that having the rights, and it's a growing and pretty long list, as Kelly said, is a really important document for us to continue to turn to, because the rights really are then the standards that we wish to be held accountable for. And it allows us to continually say, if we believe this, how are we making that visible? How are we doing that? How are we making sure that every child is able to access that? And it's become incredibly important, but it also brings us together, and I think Kelly touched upon this, as a faculty and community to be sure that we're all on the same page. We know that children only have one first school experience, and in many schools we visited, we feel like it can be luck of the draw. If you get a teacher who's musical or believes in having play in the classroom, we don't want a child to just be lucky or fortunate to have an adult who believes in integrating science or integrating diverse literature. We really want it to be a shared agreement that is based on those rights of children, and then we want to hold each other accountable for adhering to that.
Okay, wonderful. So yes, we would love to hear from you. What kind of questions you have so far? What are the rights, right, that you guys believe in, right, in order to build your school, your learning environment. So yes, so as I said, you guys are more than welcome to ask those questions in Spanish. And yeah, let's see.
And if you want to turn on your cameras, I would just be curious if these are theories and approaches that you care about too. Is this similar? What do you think we should be doing?
Voy a recordar simplemente que o podéis encender vuestro micrófono si queréis, o levantar la mano y os damos la palabra. Cualquier reflexión, idea, o duda será bienvenida.
Sí, bueno, hemos compartido muchísimo contenido porque realmente queremos compartir tanto, tenemos esas ganas de compartir que quizás es demasiado, es difícil procesar toda la información, pero esta presentación simplemente tiene que servir como una inspiración, o sea, no es este es el modelo perfecto, como Kelly y Katie han dicho, bueno, están en continuo proceso de transformación. Y bueno, yo creo que es importante, ¿no?, compartir nuestras experiencias y colaborar, así que si queréis compartir cualquier cosa, aunque no sean los derechos del niño que creéis que son fundamentales en el ambiente educativo, si hay algo que os ha llamado la atención por la presentación, también felices de contestarlo, o sea que estamos abiertas a cualquier tipo de pregunta. Y por favor no os sintáis intimidados por el contenido de esta presentación, ¿vale? Sé que es muchísimo, muchísimo para procesar.
Tenemos una mano levantada.
Ay,
adelante,
qué bien.
por favor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Teresa and I'm based in the south of Spain in El Puerto de Santa Maria. I'm a coordinator for an early years curriculum in a private international school there called the English Centre. I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It's very inspirational and it really leaves a lot of food for thought. I would like to say that I've had many of the experiences that you have talked about, the positive and the negative ones, but I think any of the people here who are working with young children know that we have such a huge responsibility, that the things that you are talking about are just ring so true. We have such a short space of time that we have them in our hands, and we have a huge amount of power to bring something positive to their lives. And I think for me, the fundamental right is what you said at the very, very beginning when you mentioned children living with joy when they're at school. And every single photo, everything that you have shown just shows such a joy of experience and learning happening in every possible way through exploration. And I think if you're working with children and you get that feedback that the joy is not there, or the photograph going back to the 19th century is actually quite emblematic, because you can see in those children's faces, the ones who are sitting with dull eyes in the classroom, it tells you a lot about when you're being successful or not in your practice, because when children are inspired and they want to do more, it tells you a lot about being on the right path. And I feel that's also one of our big duties to children, is to inspire them, to make them feel really involved. And thank you so much. It's been a real, really worthwhile being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So wonderful to hear from you. And I'm glad that you are enjoying this presentation. Yeah, and I agree with you. Joy should be the core of everything we do, right? They deserve that. They deserve, being in a joyful place. So thank you.
Conchita, adelante.
Hola, buenas tardes. Yo soy Conchita del Colegio Sector del Campo. Soy la coordinadora de los más chiquititos de la escuela. Muchas gracias por la presentación. Cada vez que os escuchamos es una inspiración y unas ganas de cambio que, como ya sabes, Isabel, estamos intentando pues cambiar e innovar, y esa curiosidad de los niños que no es fácil y que, bueno, nos facilita todas las fotos que nos mandáis y esa ayuda con la documentación que nos nos prestáis, ¿no? Que todos los equipos están con muchas ganas de seguir con este cambio, ¿no? Que es lo que creemos que necesitan estos niños de esta generación. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, Conchita. Sí, la verdad que es necesario. Yo creo que por eso necesitamos más mesas redondas, ¿verdad? Para compartir, para, pues eso, dialogar, reflexionar, y ese apoyo es necesario. O sea, el cambio no se hace solo, el cambio se hace en grupo, en equipo. Entonces, es importante crear este tipo de espacios para apoyarnos mutuamente. Esto no lo podemos hacer solas o solos, así que pues eso, pues me siento muy orgullosa de estar aquí hoy con Kellyanne, con Katie, compartiendo y colaborando y aprendiendo de vosotros. O sea que somos un equipo y estamos aquí para lo que necesitéis. ¿Vale?
And can I just say this, that, it's little by little that we were able to do this. I had studied Reggio Emilia schools for a decade, many I'm old. And so I had studied, and I could not understand how do you translate this into the classroom. And that's, I think, one of our challenges in Boston. We have incredible theorists and many universities, but it's very hard to bring it into the classroom. So it was little by little for us. The first we think about the environment and the materials, just putting out interesting things. And wow, we just saw the joy, as the first speaker said, but one little difference allowed them to, and then we just took one note, we would take just one photo. And so it is little by little and over the course of many years, and still so far to go. But we do understand that if you can change one moment for a child, it can be transformative.
Francine, por favor, please.
Sí. Hola, buenas tardes, buenas noches ya. Primero que todo, agradeceros la mesa redonda, porque siempre a los que nos gusta y tenemos pasión por los niños, siempre es interesante poder escuchar nuevas opiniones y nuevas visiones de lo que uno cree, ¿no? Y yo creo que lo más importante es tener en cuenta que cada niño es único y todo lo que podemos hacer por esa mirada, por coger esa manita, eso nos hace a nosotros como educadores intentar siempre formarnos un poco más, un poco mejor, para poder llegar hasta esa persona, para poder que ese niño se sienta especial y único en un entorno de clase donde pasa muchísimas horas al día con muchísimos compañeros. Yo creo que ahí está un poco la clave, ¿no? Que si queremos que ese niño se sienta especial, allí está la motivación para que nosotros nos formemos y para que siempre haya una nueva motivación en clase y los niños puedan sentirse lo especial y lo únicos y especiales que son, que es importante. Y muchísimas gracias, siempre es muy bueno conocer todas este tipo de trabajos que hacéis, muy, muy interesante. Muchísimas gracias.
Sí, muchísimas gracias por compartir tu pensamiento con nosotros. Estoy al 100% de acuerdo, o sea que es súper importante lo que hacemos, ¿verdad? Nuestro trabajo es fascinante, provocar ese tipo de felicidad, ese estado anímico del niño y hacerlos sentir especial es súper importante. Creo que tenemos muchísima suerte de hacer lo que hacemos, sí, como educadores. Gracias.
Bueno, voy a aprovechar mientras alguien, si quiere, levanta la mano. Voy a aprovechar yo para hacer una pregunta. La hago en español para este bilingüismo, ¿no? que hemos intentado un poco mantener y porque me es más fácil. No sé si Kelly o Katie ha dicho hacer todos los niños el mismo árbol de Navidad, ¿no? O pintar o construir el mismo árbol de Navidad, que eso, claro, aquí nos estáis emplazando, nos estáis pasando a nosotros, a los que luego formamos primaria, secundaria, bachillerato, universidad, nos estáis minando bueno, el examen único para todos o la prueba única para todos. Quiero decir, minando, lo digo positivamente, es decir, nos estáis obligando a repensar que estos niños que no van a hacer todos el mismo árbol de Navidad, luego será muy difícil proponerles a todos la misma prueba y así hacia arriba, ¿no? Escalando, porque en realidad cuando las pruebas son idénticas para todos no se pueden mostrar las capacidades de cada uno, las específicas, ¿no? de cada uno. Entonces me gusta muchísimo ese pequeño detalle del mismo árbol de Navidad, porque en las mentes de los que luego educamos a mayores, eso es una clave, es muy importante. Así que muchas gracias, ha sido de verdad también muy interesante para mí que no conozco esta etapa, pero bueno, tengo hijos también, soy mamá y entonces os lo agradezco mucho. Muchas gracias.
Do you want to translate, Isabella?
So, do you understand what she said?
Yes, but Katie doesn't speak. She speaks French, so you have to speak it in French, Katie.
Well, so maybe you can translate that in English, right? So Katie knows, right? Can you do that, Kelly?
Oh,
for Katie? Yeah.
No. But yeah, it's the idea of we're all doing the same Christmas tree and we're, and meeting the standards because you have exams too. Go ahead.
Right. So so then she's like, how can we develop this idea of not having, the same, not having, the children doing the same Christmas tree, right? In the upper levels, right? Where, like here, there is an opportunity in the early years, we have an opportunity, right, to be more creative, right? But what happens, right, in the upper grades is that the school becomes more like narrow, right? More like, all the children have to do the same test, right? So we are testing, the same skills, for every single child, right? So she loved, that reflection that you guys brought about, children doing, the same crafts, right? Like, what are we measuring there, right? What's the goal of doing, these kind of activities with them, right? When we are focusing on only the product, right? Instead of the process. So, yeah.
And as you said, that does not prepare them for the intelligence age of today, because typically we were testing them on things that they could find now on the internet. And so our interns just saw an incredible film, and if you have not seen it, is called Most Likely to Succeed, but it is with Tony Wagner, who Isabella mentioned, and it shows how high schools and colleges are being also informed by the principles of Reggio Emilia. Because when you talk to the, we have Moderna. I don't know if you know this company, Moderna, but they just found one of the vaccines, right? Mm-hmm. So just you'll have to come to Boston to see, but just a little walk from the school, there are these scientific labs. And the way the lab is everybody is engaged in projects and that is how we invent great things. If you go across the way to look at the financial district, people are working with numbers. They're not all doing the same thing because the economy does not demand that anymore, unless you are working in a factory. But we don't have as many factories. The jobs of today require that you synthesize information and engage in that. And so we have had a real crisis in the United States because our schools were still designed for factories and our jobs are not like that. And so we often hear from parents who send their children and say, well, I just hired someone and they're from an incredible university. Well, I'll tell you this wonderful story. Can I just say one little story from Most Likely to Succeed? So Stanford is a university in California that is very popular and very well regarded. And they have a medical school. And one of the professors in the medical school says, all the students raise their hand. They're very bright to go to Stanford. You get very high scores. And they always say to them, excuse me, professor, is this going to be on the boards? Is this going to be on the test? And she said, this is so terrible because we have diseases, and we are living this now, right, that were not on the test. Coronavirus was not on the test. We didn't know that that was going to be something that happened. And so what happens if you have a generation of doctors who only know how to solve the problems that were on the test? Because so many of our problems next are unknown. And so I think that is really reflective of an opportunity in our educational system to make sure that we are giving new problems so that we have a generation of doctors and scientists and engineers and mathematicians who can solve problems that have not happened yet.
And I'll just quickly add that we agree that there's many primary and secondary schools that are still very much like nursery schools in the US that are teaching in a really traditional way. Even just dividing children so narrowly by birth date can be so limiting to children, and it very much comes historically from preparing children for an industrial age. But we still so strongly believe that the foundation of 0 to 5 can make such an incredible impact on the way that children will forever think and approach the world, regardless of where they go next in their educational journey. It's just a very quick and personal anecdote. My son attended Charlestown Nursery School and had an inquiry-based early childhood experience. And then he went on to a kindergarten program, so for 5-year-olds, in the public school system where I live. And he had a substitute teacher one day who gave them coloring sheets. And he had not had a lot of experience with worksheets and crayons and just the expectation that you would spend some time coloring it in. So he came home from school and he showed me his coloring sheets. And I thought, oh, my heavens, he left this nursery school where he had hands-on learning experiences. And now he has not just the coloring sheets, but they were all the same. He chose 6 of the same cat. It was a cat coloring sheet. I very vividly remember it. And I said, oh my goodness, you chose the same coloring sheet, and this is how you spent your morning. Oh my heavens, I'm going to homeschool, we are going to withdraw. This is so misaligned with everything I know as a teacher. And he said to me, oh, see, when I line them up like this, it reminds me of Andy Warhol. I was thinking of the artist I learned about in school and thinking about the soup cans. I don't know, I hope you're familiar with this artist, so this anecdote makes sense. But Andy Warhol, of course, painted soup cans that were all identical but in different colors. So, of course, he had studied these artists in nursery school, and rather than feeling like this was a rote activity, he was able to take it to another level and apply the skills that he had learned and apply the creativity and that opportunity to show that he was able to represent in a different way despite the limitation of the worksheet. So that small anecdote, and there's hundreds from alumni of schools that are a lot like ours, that really offer children the opportunity to not just follow directions, but to imagine and create and evolve in a really different way.
Thank you, Kelly. Kelly, thank you. It's great. We have, I think, the last question, Pilar, because it's a little late here. So, Pilar, adelante.
Agradeceros sobre todo la ponencia, que creo que ha sido, como ya se ha dicho, ¿no?, muy inspiradora para todos nosotros. Y un poquito en la línea que se está comentando, creo que vuestra propuesta es, bueno, pues tiene, o para mí tiene un punto fundamental, ¿no?, que es el respetar, pues, las diferencias individuales de los niños, los ritmos de aprendizaje que son tan importantes en educación infantil, y que, bueno, pues esa diferencia evolutiva se ve sobre todo en esa etapa más que en ninguna otra, ¿no? Y un poquito en esta línea, bueno, sí que me gustaría preguntaros, ¿no?, cuál es vuestra posición hacia, bueno, pues que todos los niños puedan tener las mismas oportunidades independientemente de esas capacidades con las que tienen o con las que están desarrollando en ese momento. y porque además en la etapa infantil necesitan tanta atención, ¿no? Creo que vosotros, ¿no?, vais en esa línea más pues integradora, inclusiva, que tanta falta nos hace, ¿no?, a veces en las escuelas y un poco pues saber cuál es vuestra opinión acerca de este punto.
Kelly, would you like to make a comment or should I jump in? Bueno, pues la verdad es que yo creo que por eso estoy en este campo y creo que por eso es lo que lucho por un sistema educativo que sea más inclusivo, que se respete al niño, porque evidentemente la ciencia nos ha demostrado que aunque haya una secuencia que es predecible, cada niño es diferente y evoluciona y se desarrolla de diferente manera. Y no es un impedimento, el impedimento lo creamos nosotros los educadores cuando creamos las mismas expectativas para todos los niños. Entonces, creo que es nuestra labor la de observar, la de ver dónde está el niño, qué tipo de dificultades tiene. Hay un vídeo que es maravilloso, que me encanta, que probablemente lo utilizaremos para la próxima mesa redonda, y en ese vídeo se ve a la maestra creando un ambiente de aprendizaje, creando diferentes entornos, diferentes rincones con diferentes materiales, materiales manipulativos, materiales sensoriales, materiales donde el niño puede expresarse a través del arte, rincones donde el niño, si necesita más movimiento, pues puede utilizar su cuerpo, ¿no?, para expresarse también. Y también rincones para la calma, donde el niño, pues si necesita regular sus emociones, tiene un espacio, ¿no?, de calma. Y bueno, ya lo sabemos que los niños pasan muchísimo tiempo en el cole, pasan por muchísimas transiciones, constantemente les estamos exigiendo que hagan algo, ¿verdad? Que recojan sus juguetes, que se pongan en fila, que se pongan los zapatitos, ahora tienes que salir. O sea, que constantemente el niño tiene que autorregularse, ¿verdad? Tiene que decir, vale, pues la maestra me ha dicho que tengo que recoger, aunque lo estoy disfrutando muchísimo, pero el niño tiene que tener esa capacidad de regulación, de decir, ok, aunque lo estoy pasando genial, tengo que terminar, ¿no?, con esto. O sea, que es un entorno que si no lo diseñamos de manera equilibrada puede ser demasiado para él, ¿verdad? Y hay niños pues que nacen pues con una capacidad de autorregulación estupenda, y hay otros que son más sensibles, que esa sobreestimulación, ¿no?, les genera frustración. Entonces el crear ese ambiente pues va a fomentar muchísimo, ¿no?, el desarrollo del niño y las diferencias, ¿no?, en el aprendizaje del niño. Y eso, como te comentaba, hay un vídeo que lo enseñaremos en la próxima mesa redonda, desde la maestra cómo crea ese ambiente, y hay una actividad donde los niños están manipulando piececitas pequeñitas para hacer como un collage, ¿no? Entonces hay un niño que por cualquier razón no tiene esas habilidades psicomotrices, ¿no? La psicomotricidad fina no la tiene totalmente desarrollada, entonces tiene alguna frustración, pero la observación de la maestra, de estar allí de una manera presente, activa, pues le hace darle otro tipo de materiales que son magnéticos, no tienen como un imán, son piececitas pequeñitas, pero tienen el imán. Entonces le ofrece una bandeja metálica donde el niño puede manipular y hacer un collage, pero de una manera que es menos frustrante para él por la limitación que tiene en la psicomotricidad fina. Entonces, bueno, eso en otro ambiente donde no se adapta a las necesidades del niño, pues eso le podría crear frustración. Entonces, pues sí, lo veo fundamental crear este tipo de entornos donde podamos apoyar, ¿no?, las necesidades de cada niño. Lo veo fundamental. Esa es una de mis pasiones y por lo que creo que hoy en día estoy en este mundo. Sí.
Muchas gracias.
De nada.
For us, more than half of our children are children with special rights or special needs. and they have very unique profiles. So our job is to know each child when they come in and to set up environments where they will be successful. The teachers are trained to help with the regulation and with the speech acquisition and the OT, and all of those things are very much in place. One thing that is always interesting to us is sometimes parents will go see different schools and they will see a very traditional structured school, and it is not, you can see children getting frustrated. And sometimes they will say, why is your school so quiet? Why are children so engaged? And it's because we have responded with the strategies that they need. And when the child has what they need, they can be successful within the content. So it does have all of those other systems in place to make children feel like their unique needs are getting supported.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will show a video. You'll have to come to the school next time so you can see the whole thing, but I can take you around. I am here. So I can show you next time, Boston, the whole thing. So you can see some of the kinds of opportunities, because the teachers have already staged the opportunities for tomorrow, and they have the classroom set up. And I know someone was asking, that is a good place to begin, to have a time in your, even if it's a small time in your day, just to offer these opportunities around play and inquiry and see what happens.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Well, I have to say that we have like, I mean, we could present for an hour, an hour. We have a lot of content to cover. We were expecting to show you all a few videos, but Carmen, I don't know if we have time. It has been 2 hours, right?
Yes, no, we have not more time. Sorry, because it's a little late here.
I know.
It's 8 p.m. So
oh wow,
the time for dinner for our children. So
I know,
think,
of course,
yes.
of course. I appreciate, you guys staying with us for 2 hours, around that time in Spain. So thank you.
Maybe the next roundtable, next time you can show all these videos or if you want, you can send us a video of the classroom or some activity that you, I don't know, what you want. It will be so nice for us. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
okay.
We will talk about the next roundtable, or I don't know, webinar, roundtable, I don't know. And
sounds great. Perfecto, Carmen.
We have to finish.
Ok, perfecto. Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias.
Isabela, thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
Very inspiring. And
thank you.
We're waiting to see you again. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias a todos por la hora y por estar ahí, por el interés, y cualquier comentario que queráis hacer, pues, o alguna idea para la próxima vez, para que podamos hacerlo igual más centrado en algún interés particular, pues no tenéis más que poneros en contacto conmigo o con Isabela directamente. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Thank you very much.
Gracias. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Adiós.